Hi everyone, welcome to the Unique Perspective Show, live on Hakol Radio, powered by the Monty Mavasser. My name is Yehuda Blonder, and on today's show we have the one, the only, a dear friend of mine. He's a very hush of a person. He's a paramedic. He does lots of things for the cloud, and let's get the show on the road. Welcome, Simcha Shain, to the Unique Perspective Show,
Huda.
powered by Hakol Radio. How are you doing?
What's up, Huda? I'm so excited.
It's
Your
not
debut
normal.
show.
It's
Wow.
it's literally amazing. It's a dream come true.
Yehuda, it's well deserved. It's something I know that you have the ability to communicate with people, to speak to people, to make people feel good about themselves. It's something that you do all the time. I look forward to have my Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov calls from you. And I know you don't just do it to me, you do it to everybody, but you're just a special, special person. And I'm privileged and proud to call you a dear friend and a dear brother.
Thank you. So let's jump right in, Simcha. Let's talk about your Lakewood experience from growing up until now. Let's hear what your unique perspective in life is.
Well, I can tell you how I started. I went to 4 elementary schools, which is, I think, not bad. Well, it's technically 3, but we argue that it was 4 because I went to the Cheder for primary, first, and second, and then I went to Satmar for third and fourth. Yeah, well, Lakewood Satmar. I think it was called Satmar Light, but there was a big exodus of people who went when I was in 3rd grade. Went to Satmar for a couple of years. Maybe it was cheap tuition. I have no idea. Well, my father decided one day that I'm going to Satmar, so I went to Satmar for 2 years. Then I went back to the Cheder. So I don't know if that
Satmar,
is that called a
Satmar
third
was
school
like
or that's
a
just 2
drop in the
schools.
bucket.
Yeah. And then I went to another yeshiva for 8th grade, and then I went to Cleveland to Tell's yeshiva for 9th grade, and then I went to Adelphi yeshiva for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, which is actually my uncle's yeshiva, Rabbi Yerucham Shain, and that's right. And then after that, I went to Denver yeshiva.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what was your relationship back in the day in Lakewood? What was it like in Lakewood when you were growing up?
So I'm probably what you define as one of the kids at risk from the original ones that grew up in Lakewood before there was any program. So me and a couple of my friends, I guess we were the original ones out there. But Lakewood was nice. It was very small. I can tell you that every time we drove on the Parkway or the Route 9 heading to New York, we look at the car, that had, looked like a Jewish smashed up and dented car like everybody had those days. And we knew that it was somebody from Lakewood. We knew everybody. The yeshiva list then was like maybe 2 pages long. Maybe it had, I don't know, maybe 100 families, 150 families. That's it. There were 3 schools in Lakewood. There was Lakewood Cheder, and then there was Satmar opened up then, a very, very small school. I don't even know if Satmar had 100 kids in the whole school. There was a Batal Hebrew Day School that had maybe, I don't know, maybe another couple hundred kids, but that was it. I can tell you this, that I was the first parallel class in Lakewood Cheder, just to put it in perspective. Now I believe they have 10 or 12 parallel classes. I was the first one, and all the other yeshivas opened up, way after I left there. So Lakewood is very, very small then. I grew up maybe 7 blocks away from the yeshiva. When my father bought his home in 1976, I think, they told him that they couldn't understand how he would move so far, and he said, just give it some time and you'll see that Lakewood just going to expand. And, I still remember when people moved out, they'd have to walk 20 minutes. And now look what it's become. It's become, there are 5 towns. Jackson and Toms River and Brick and Howell and
Lakewood is on the back burner at this point. What was your relationship with, let's say, Reb Schneier Cutler, Reb Aaron Cutler?
Well, Rabbi Kala passed away before my
Okay.
time. So Schneider Kala, I remember. I remember when he passed away. He passed away, I think, on a Thursday or a Friday, and they brought the Aron into BMG, into Beis Medrash Kavaya, and
Wow.
people sat and said Tehillim the whole time. I mean, I knew him. I would say good Shabbos to him.
Right.
That's really as far as it went. I was very young. I was probably maybe
Wow.
8 or 9 years old when he
And look,
passed away.
Lakewood is very materialistic now. Look what it has become. I'm saying from back then to now. It's crazy.
Well, definitely, right. It's expanded in Tyre too. Like they still call it Lakewood Era Tyre, but it's definitely materialistic. I can tell you, growing up, when we had to buy a suit or had to buy a hat, we would go to
Wow.
New York. We'd go to the right place, and we'd go to the hat rack and Kova
Kova
hats. And
hats?
there was no concept of restaurants in Lakewood when we grew
I
up. Yeah, Kova
do.
hats. I don't know if you
It
remember
was
that.
it was on
That
13th
was I think it
Avenue.
was in Borough Park. Right. So then, if you wanted something before Yom Tif, you have to take a ride to New York. We went to the right place to get suits. And now people come from New
It's
York
literally
to Lakewood to
it's
buy anything.
it's
There's pretty much
crazy.
nothing you can't get
It's
here.
not normal what Lakewood has become. Yeah.
Baruch Hashem.
Now, I didn't want to get into this so quickly, but growing up, did you have this feeling of you wanted to become a Hatzalah guy, and what drove you to becoming the paramedic that you are today?
So it's interesting that when Hatzalah started in Lakewood in 1981. I was like 8 or 9 years old at that point. And my father was from the original, from the, I think, seven founding Hatzalah members. So when my father, I believe, was the oldest member. So he was the only one who had kids, like young kids, myself and my sisters, and they used to come to our house, the Hatzalah guys, and they weren't Hatzalah,
EMTs.
they were just training to become EMTs. And they would train in our, right, because before there was even a Hatzalah, there was a Lakewood First Aid, which my father was a member of. He joined for a little bit of time, and before they opened up Hatzalah, but they used to train on us. They used to put splints on us and lay us down and put us on
Wow.
backboards and things like that, because that's what they practice on. So my father was a Hatzalah member, and I remember that he used to drop everything and he used to leave shul and he used to leave the house and leave his work, whatever he did. And I can tell you this, from that age is when I said, when I grew up, that's what
Wow.
I want to be. I want to be a Hatzalah member. So when I was maybe 20 years old, I think I was 20 years old, I decided one day, you know what? I need to become an EMT. I wasn't married then. I said I want to become an EMT. So I picked up a phone. It was before, just like when
Back in
cell
the
phones were coming
90s.
out.
Back in the
And I
90s.
picked up a phone and I called, right? I called two local first aid squads. One of them was the Lakewood First Aid Squad that my father had been on many years before. There's a lot of from people on there right now. And then I called a local squad, the neighboring town called Howell. They called me back immediately, like literally 10 minutes after I called. They called me back and they said, I said, I want to join your squad and I want to become an EMT. And they said, well, when can you be here? I said, well, where are you located? And they told us where. I said, well, I could be there. It was like a 7-minute drive. I said, I could be there in 10 minutes. So 10 minutes after, so 20 minutes after my
Wow.
first phone call, I was already meeting them. And about 10 minutes after that, they accepted me in. And I think like 2 weeks later, I
Wow.
started my EMT class. So that was like in 1993. And I joined them. I was with them for a couple of years. And then in 1996, I got married in 95. And then 1996, I joined Hatzalah. So actually Shushan Purim.
Wow.
So we just hit 27 years that I'm on here, Shushan Purim. And then I became a paramedic as we started training in 2005. I became a paramedic in
Wow. So from
2007.
1995, 1996 to 2005 to 2007, you were just a regular EMT.
Correct. I was correct. I was an
Whatever,
EMT
an
then.
EMT
It's not just regular, it was an
is
EMT.
important, but I'm saying you
Yeah.
were just an EMT.
Right. We didn't have any concept of paramedics in Lakewood at that point. It didn't exist. Everything had to be run by the local organizations that had paramedics out here, a company called Monarch and some other companies. And we actually had a person, I'm not going to mention his name, but
I,
who literally died in our arms because we had no medics available. And it was the cause in Yeshiva and BMG. And it was a businessman, somebody who had a very successful business, and he would learn Daf Yomi at night. And one night in the middle of Daf Yomi, he got very, very sick, and we recognized right away how sick he was. And they would have literally there would be one paramedic unit that would cover Lakewood and parts of Jackson and parts of Brick and Toms River. And if that medic unit
Wow.
wasn't available, you just
That's
didn't have
pretty
medics.
crazy.
And he passed away. He literally passed away in our arms. And we made it. We made a decision then. Actually, myself and another Hatzalah member, Moshe Muller, we sat together that night and we said, you know what, we're going to do whatever we have to do to get paramedics in Hatzalah of Lakewood.
I'm
And we had
sure
a very hard
it
time.
was
We had a
very
very
hard
hard time. We approached
because you were
the
Hatzalah
organization
of
that
Lakewood was very, very small at that point.
I don't know, right, but I don't think I don't know if it was being that it was that small, but they just don't understand the concept that we want to volunteer. And we said, you know, we cover 100% of our calls on our EMTs, but what do we do if we don't have paramedics? And we want to have paramedics. We have to petition the state, and we actually have to hire a lobbying firm to go after them. And finally, the state told this organization called Monarch, and they said, you know, you better figure out how to work with them, because if not, we're going to give them the ability to open on their own. So we started training. 7 guys went into the first course in 1995, September of 1995, we started. And
Right.
we had, no, I'm sorry, September 2005, we started. And we had no way of knowing. We knew going in that there was a possibility that we had a very, very long road ahead of us to see if they'll even allow it. But we got our training, and then afterwards we went to meet with this company, and they were receptive. They said, but you can't work together until you guys have experience. You have to work together for at least a year. So for a year, all of us worked in the 911 system, part-time or per diem, whatever it was. And then that was October 2007. Then in October 2008, the Lakewood Hatzalah volunteer paramedic program started. And I will tell you that to this date, we're still the only volunteer paramedic program in the state. Hopefully some other Hatzalahs in North Jersey, Passaic, and I think Orange and maybe Bergen County are going to hopefully
Wow.
get some stuff up running real soon. We're hoping.
Let's jump ahead to to your business today, how you founded Paraflight, and to your business today, how you founded Paraflight, and what drove your uniqueness to join, to make a company like Paraflight. Okay.
So we'll have to back up a little bit. Before Paraflight started was actually probably the time that I probably met you. So I had a very, very close friend, as did you, and his name was Shlomo Zakheim. Shlomo Zakheim was a philanthropist. He was the first from paramedic in New York, the first from Hatzalah paramedic. I got to meet him after 9/11 when he created something called the Heart Team.
Were you part of 9/11? Did you go to 9/11 or?
I did. I responded. So I responded from Lakewood. When it first happened, we called New York Hatzalah. New York Hatzalah sent all their ambulances into the city. We had 3 ambulances at that point in Lakewood, and I called H-Base, which is New York Hatzalah, and I said, "This is Lakewood. We could be anywhere you need in the next hour and change. Where would you like us to go?" And they said, "We really can use ambulances in Brooklyn because
Right.
all the ambulances went to the city." So we sent 1 ambulance into Brooklyn and into Borough Park to cover Borough Park, and then we sent a second one to cover Flatbush. And being that I was a Flatbush Hatzalah member then, I jumped on a Flatbush Hatzalah ambulance and I went into the city. So the towers were already down when we got in there,
that
but
day
it was very,
one,
very
or
dark,
was that after
gloomy.
day
It was
one?
just
Day one.
day one.
Wow.
No, day one, September 11th.
And you
September
still
11th.
haven't
So
you still hadn't
I was
met
probably there by 11 o'clock in the
Shlomo
morning.
or Beinish Mendel Zechron Levacha.
No, I had not met them at that point. That's right, correct. I met them. I don't know if I interacted with them that day, but I'll tell you that soon after, Shlomo recognized, because
Right.
the world was in chaos and turmoil at that point, and nobody knew what was going on. Israel was at war with the Palestinians and the Arabs and Gaza and everywhere else, and Shlomo had this vision that what's going to happen is that when Israel is going to be called up to go into war, then they call up all the reserves, right? And the reserves include their paramedics and their EMTs. So he created a program there that he built with Chevra Hatzalah, and then it was with Mada, that to allow us to go in there and get trained. So EMTs and paramedics and doctors would go to Israel and get trained. And actually Shlomo paid for it all. He underwrote the entire mission, and I was privileged actually to be on the first trip. So it was a trip of 20 people, and it included Shlomo Zakheim and Heshi Jacobs, who was the president of Hatzalah, and Beinish Mendel, and Michael Vach, and so many of very, very close friends that I have until this day were those that I met on that trip. And that's the trip that really changed my life because it allowed me to become very, very close with literally with Shlomo and with Michael and with Banish Zechron Levracha. So soon after that, we became very, very close. I think there was might have been a period of 5 years or so afterwards. We went back training a couple of times, and then I don't even remember all the logistics, but we ended up becoming very, very close friends. We bought a few businesses together, and we became very close. And he invited me to join him in his chesed. It was a tremendous chesed that I had. Shlomo had his own private jet. I don't know if you remember it, but he had a private jet, a Lear 31, that he actually outfitted with oxygen and with a stretcher. And he would send me and Banish and Michael and others, around the country with people, those who didn't have money, who needed to be able to get to hospitals. And his jet was bought for chesed. I can tell you that his jet was sent to send people who would go visit Jonathan Pollard, and every time people would look at the Jewish press and see articles about people who went to visit Jonathan Pollard, but yet nobody mentioned, because Shlomo would never let him do it, but I'm doing it now. Shlomo never let anybody mention the fact that he was the one who paid for it, for people to be able to go down to Butner, to the prison, for people to go visit Jonathan Pollard. And he was very, very close with him as well. I met Jonathan a number of months ago, and his hakaras hatov to Shlomo and to Fegi Zakheim was truly immense. But me and Shlomo became very, very close. We traveled the world together, and I said we had these businesses together. And then in 2012, Shlomo got sick. Shlomo had been at
Wow.
ground zero for greater than 30 days. He actually had at some point he owned the largest ambulance company, I believe, in New York State, and he lost 14 of his personnel that day at ground zero. And he and Banish and quite a few others spent a very long time at ground zero in the rubble trying to help dig for
It's
survivors.
no,
And unfortunately, Shlomo
it's
got sick.
unreal. It's unreal what they did.
Right. So I still have the email that Shlomo sent me and Michael on the day actually that night he got diagnosed on I think a Thursday or a Friday. I knew something was wrong because it was the first time in many, many years, probably like in 10 years, that I had not spoken to Shlomo on an Erev Shabbos. And I even remember mentioning to people, I was like, it's so strange. I called him like 4 times. And for me not to speak to Shlomo on the Matzah Shabbos, we got the worst email you can imagine. And it was him basically telling me and Michael, who we called his brothers, but
Wow.
we called each other the triplets. And he said, I have some great news to share with you. Can you imagine? Great news to share. And he told me that
Mhm.
he takes Lipitor for his cholesterol, and he had to get routine blood work. When they went to do his routine blood work, they realized that something was wrong. They told him to come in, and they realized that he got leukemia, and it was secondary to his exposure. And he said, I'm going to be off the grid for a bit, but I'm going to fight this, and I need you guys to run the show right now. And I didn't actually mention that in 2010. Shlomo invited me and Michael and others and
So
brought us into
that
Camp
was the
Simcha. So
first.
I was a
I think it
paramedic
was
at
the
Camp
first
Simcha,
time I
which I am
met
still
you
to this day.
in 2010 in the
Correct.
infirmary in Camp Simcha.
2010.
I
Yes.
It was at night,
Right.
and I didn't know who you were.
Yeah. Right. And I didn't know who you were, and Shlomo introduced you as his best friend. So
Right.
I thought I was his best friend, but apparently Shlomo had a lot of best friends. But then we
Yeah.
became best friends, me and you, Yehuda. So that was very, very exciting. So yeah, so I've been in Camp Simcha, and he would do the helicopters there, and we still do it to this day in his memory. But in 2012, he got sick, and unfortunately, in 2013, he passed away, Rosh Hashanah, and next Rosh Hashanah is going to be his
It's
10th year
crazy.
aside.
It's crazy.
And right, and as I mentioned before,
Right.
Yehuda, that Shlomo had his a private jet. He would send me around, and we owned these pharmacies together. And one day I got a message from Shlomo through Fagi that says Shlomo wants to meet with you. And I came running down to
Right.
Sloan. Very few people would even get in there. I think it was like myself. I think like non-family members like myself, Michael, and Danish were the only ones really allowed to go in and visit him. And I came into there, and I remember he was sitting on his bed, and he says,
No one
I didn't
believed
believe he
it.
was going to
No
pass
one
away.
believed
I
it.
thought he was just going to survive. Right, right. But I wonder if he knew.
At
I
that point,
think
I
he
think
might have.
he
I
did.
think he might
I
have
think he
known. His
did.
lungs were destroyed. Yeah. So he calls me into his room and he says, "I want you to take my jet." And I was like, "Okay, and go where?" Because he would always say, "Take my jet and go to Mayo Clinic, go to Cleveland Clinic, go to Cincinnati, go to LA, whatever it was." I was like, "Okay, and go where?" He goes, "No, no, I want you to take my jet." I said, "Well, what do you want me to do with it?" He says, "I want you to open up a business. I want you to open an air ambulance business." And I wanted to go change the world. He said, but never forget the chesed component of it. And I didn't know what to make of it. And he passed away really soon after that, and I didn't know what to do. And I spoke to his chief pilot, and I spoke to Ozzy Zakheim, and I spoke to Faye Zakheim, and I made a decision at that point that I'm not going to take the jet.
Probably
It was
it's
too
probably
overwhelming.
also it was
I knew
probably
nothing about the
since
business.
you
I'm
were
going to go
very
take it.
close with friends with Shlomo, it was probably very hard for you to take his private jet and do business, not business, but like chesed and business together at the same time with Shlomo Zakheim's private jet.
Possibly, possibly, but I'll tell you this also about about it
Yeah.
was that it's very overwhelming. Jets are very expensive and very expensive to run. I didn't have the money to go ahead and do that, so I ended up selling the pharmacy business
Okay.
to Shlomo's family because that was very
Alright.
hard for me because I had that business with Shlomo. It was very hard for me to stay
That
in
was
that
Citywide
and continue.
Pharmacy,
So
right?
I sold that to his family, and then well, correct. Well, it was Citywide. It was Senior Script, and it was
Right.
Revival, and then it was Citywide, and then it was Revival. It was three pharmacies that we had. So I ended up selling that to his family. I sold my position out, and then I said, you know what, I want to open up this air ambulance business. And I started, and there was, a few big stumbling blocks in the road, but we kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. And Baruch Hashem, we opened up. I opened up Paraflight, and we started by just doing air ambulance. So
What does air ambulance
we
mean?
used to bring.
What do you mean by air ambulance?
So air ambulance means taking a private jet and having it full of equipment. It's
Okay.
basically an ICU in the sky. So it has cardiac monitors, and it has meds, and it has pumps, and it has intubation abilities, and anything that you need to treat somebody. You can take them directly out of an ICU. You can take them directly out of an ICU, and you fly them wherever they have to go. So people who are either going from one hospital to a specialty center, or those who are going to maybe coming home and going into a rehab center or something like that. People are stuck somewhere. We go and pick them up. Some people are very, very sick and they have to go on an air ambulance, and some don't. There are many people that we can actually take on a commercial flight. You can
I
send a
just
nurse
wanna
or a doctor or a
pause
paramedic,
you for a
and
second.
we
I don't remember what year it was, but I ended up going to the Miami Marathon. Uh, I think it's close to 10 years already, and I ended up unfortunately getting sick there, and in the end it was a major snowstorm and all that. So I had to get back. The flights were getting canceled left and right, and I called you, and I don't know what happened. I called you, or I called another friend of mine, and something happened, and in the end you were able to you were able to fly me back to Brooklyn, to New York privately, and I have a great Hakar Satay
right,
for that.
right. Always a pleasure to work with anybody, but especially with you.
Thank you. Um, I see you do lots of stuff in with the minyan and all that stuff. Could we get into that, like, subject of all that minyan stuff?
Absolutely. So the minyan, as I mentioned before earlier, I was, I think, a kid at risk when I grew up in Lakewood, and we didn't have any minyan or anything. And the minyan started when there was a group of guys who just wanted just a place where they could be themselves, or a place where they wouldn't be judged, a place they can come and they can daven and they can learn and they can interact with their friends. And
Who was
it
it
was
run
started
by?
with a group
Who
of
was it run
guys
by?
led by
Oh,
Rabbi Chaim
wow.
Abadi. Chaim Abadi is the Rav. He's the one. He gets all the credit for it for starting the minyan, and it still runs to this day. It must be it's over 20
what
years, over 20 years that it's going on. Maybe 20,
what's
maybe,
your
yeah.
involvement with them?
Well, I've been involved with
Mhm.
them literally from the beginning, from day one, literally from the
Mhm.
first day that it started. I've been involved. And I don't have a very, very active role in there right now because life gets busy, and even just to get to the minyan because
I'm
of the
sure,
traffic of the town, it would
sure.
take
The
a half
crazy
hour each way to get there. But I
because
try to, I
Lakewood
try to,
is what Lakewood is. It takes 45 minutes to get to the Minyan from where you live.
Right, yeah. So I try to go like Sunday mornings. I try to go there whenever else, special occasions. But I speak to Reb Chaim all the time, probably a couple
I
of times
saw
a week for
recently
sure.
that you
And
went
then
on
I
a
got
trip with
involved.
them. What was that all about?
Yeah, so we go to do a trip every year in Israel, a mentor's mission, where we go out because there are a lot of boys who start over here at the Minyan, and then they go out to yeshiva in Israel. So we spend a week. We go out there, spend a week together, and then we do a big Shabbos together, usually like 60, 70, or 80 people, and
Wow.
it's pretty exciting of what we do. And then I got involved because I got involved in Chai Lifeline, because I got involved in Minyan. Then I ended up. We always have opportunities. When opportunities come in, if you can
Now I
open that
see
door
you're
and get
also
in, it really
involved
opens up more
in another
opportunities.
organization called
And
the Special Children's Center. How did you get involved with that?
yes, so I have a friend. We have a mutual friend. His name is Chaim
Okay.
Levy. You know Chaim Levy, right? And Chaim Levy's on a ventilator, and he had a dream that he wanted to go to Israel. That's what he wanted to do. And because I fly patients all over the world as a
Are
as
you
a
by the
paramedic,
way a flight
and his
paramedic,
sister
a
called me up
licensed
one
flight
day.
paramedic?
I am. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a certified flight paramedic. Certified flight paramedic, certified medical
Hmm.
escort in both ALS and BLS. Anyway, so I had discussions with this my friend Chaim Levy that he wants to go to Israel. I said, when you want to go to Israel, I'm going to come with you. Just give me a heads up notice so I can clear my calendar. And when you want to go, we're going to go. So this was like on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And I said, how long do you think it'll be? He said, we want to put together money. He thinks in the next like
Okay.
2-3 months or so it's going to happen. So I said, okay. Anyway, he probably put up a GoFundMe or some similar page. He launched it on a Thursday, and on
Okay.
Friday, his sister calls me. His sister calls me up and says, "Hey, remember you told Chaim Levy that when you go to Israel, you're willing to come along as his private paramedic?" I said, "Of course." I said, I guess in a couple
What?
months." She goes, "Actually, we're leaving Sunday." I said, "What does that mean?" I said, "What do you mean we're leaving Sunday?" I said, "We just launched their campaign. Did you get all the money?" So she says, "No, actually, what happened was that he launched it, and somehow somebody sent the link
Wow.
to Shlomo Yehuda Rechnitz, who lives in LA. And Shlomo Yehuda said that he wants to get involved. And it so happened to be that Shlomo Yehuda was flying that Sunday to Israel. And he says, I'm
Wow.
going to Israel. I'll take the guys along with me and I'll bring them back. So there's no expense for the plane, which is the most expensive thing. And we said they're going to fly us. We said, okay. So I get a phone call Friday and she's like, listen, we got to leave Sunday. Meanwhile, Chaim Levy, we find out. So we started moving forward, getting equipment together, everything that we need. And Chaim Levy realized that he didn't have a passport.
Wow.
So Tzvi Glock from Amudim gets the passport office open in Manhattan on a Sunday for Chaim Levy to get his passport, and we were scheduled to leave Sunday night. Meanwhile, two people from the Special Children's Center, Janine Shweki and Chaya Rachel Bender, who started it, were involved with Chaim Levy, and they were coming along on the trip, so it became more of like a center trip. I had no idea what the Special Children's Center was. I kid you not. I grew up in this town. I'll even tell you that Chaya Rachel Bender lives 5 houses away from me. I had no idea who she was. Her husband also happens to be my second cousin, but it's a
I'm
very, very
sure it
big
is
Shain family.
because
I didn't
my
know.
old
I had
neighbor
no idea.
is related to you somehow through Shain.
And I probably would have
Exactly.
known them if I saw them in the street. But right, so they ended up coming along, and it was myself and Chaim Levy had a close friend that came along with him, and I was a paramedic, and Shlomo Yehuda came along, and his brother, and Freddie Freeman, the Shadchan came, and Chaya Rachel and Janine, and we went to Israel. It was an epic, epic week. I actually had to fly back in between because I had a bar mitzvah and a wedding over here, so I flew back in between, and then I went back
Wow.
to go pick up Chaim Levy and to fly back with him. So I'll
Right.
tell you, Shlomo Yehuda actually covered everything on that trip. Put us up in the Waldorf, took care of all the transportation. We needed special handicap transportation to take his wheelchair. He took care of everything, and actually Shlomo Yehuda had to leave like a couple of days before we did, and he actually booked us all, paid for everybody's tickets
Wow.
for us to come back on El Al. So once I interacted with the Special Children's Center, I said, you know what, I'm going to get involved. I said, what can I do to help? And I ended up becoming the paramedic for the Special Children's Center. So many trips that we've done all over the world, from Israel numerous times to Costa Rica to LA, wherever they go, I fly along
Wow.
with them as their paramedic.
Wow. You're unbelievable. First of all, for you to fly back and forth in the middle of the week for a wedding and a bar mitzvah, it must be. I don't want to say exhaustive, but you must be very tired from flying back during the week on a whim.
Yeah, well, correct. But that's what we got to do. You know, sometimes you have to juggle numerous
Yeah,
things. So we do, it's in life. You do the same thing, right? We have to figure out what's important. Sometimes we can't do everything, but if we could figure out how to make it work, even if it meant going to a very, very close friend's son's wedding, to a very, very close friend's bar mitzvah, that's what we if we're able to make it do, you know, happen, we happen. There are many times that I fly people to Israel. So I'll fly people who are elderly or people who are not well, and I'll fly them to Israel because they want to go on a week's vacation, and sometimes I'll drop them off and I'll have somebody cover me there, and I'll fly back, and then I'll come
I
back,
think you
2
learned
days
that from
later and pick
Shlomo
them up.
Zachman. If I'm not mistaken, Shlomo, whenever he flew, he always made sure to fly back for Shabbos to be home for Shabbos. If I'm not mistaken.
I definitely try to do that. That's absolutely correct with him, and I definitely try to do that. It doesn't
Right,
always work when I was with the Minyan
right.
trip culminates
No,
on
but I'm saying
Shabbos,
most
so that's
trips
not really an option.
that
But right, correct. I try to schedule trips no later, if possible, no later than Wednesday, so that I can get there Thursday and I can come back
that's
for
really
Shabbos.
unbelievable. Now, one last topic. You have part of Paraflight is another subject, organ flights. What is that
Oh yes,
all
so
about?
organ flights. One of the So organ flights is it's another division of what we do in Paraflight. So I mentioned before that Paraflight does air ambulance. We also do corporate executive charter, and then our core focus now, what we focus on primarily, is being able to fly organ
I
transplant
think that's
teams
the most
to pick
unique
up
thing that I've ever
pick
heard
up.
someone do. I don't know any other company that does organ flights. Only your company.
Right. Well, there are
I'm
definitely
talking about
companies in the country
from
that do it.
from
There are
from
companies even,
company owned
right.
from companies that do organ.
Right. Right. I believe we probably are the only from company. It's a 24, when I tell you it's a 24/7 attention to detail, very, very high stressful job. But Baruch Hashem, we have a very, very solid team behind us that really helps make all the pieces work together. And it's very difficult and it's very challenging, but we know that we're saving lives. And I'll tell you
Yeah,
what really prompted me to do this. So we had a mutual friend named Yochi Ruby, right? Yochi Ruby is a Chaim Bracha. Yochi Ruby was a very close friend that we met in Camp Simcha. Yochi was born. He was born very, very small. He weighed 20 ounces when he was born. And when he was 8 or 9 years old, he developed something called interstitial
lung. Right.
kidney and liver disease. Into kidney and liver. So he got a kidney and a liver transplant when he was like 8 or 9 years old. And he was very small, you remember, right? He was very, very
Right.
small because he didn't grow after that. And when he was like 18 or 19 years old, he developed that same disease that attacked his kidneys and
Okay.
his liver attacked his lungs. And Shlomo was still alive then, but he started getting sicker. In the beginning, he didn't even need oxygen or anything. Then he started getting dependent on oxygen. And they said the only thing that's really going to help him, that's really going to save his life, is Yochi needs a lung. He has to get a lung transplant. So the journey started. And I used to fly with his parents and some other friends too. And we started flying around the country to try to get him listed for a lung. And every place would turn him down. We went
Wow.
to 11 different
And
transplant centers
what was the
all
reason
over
for
the place.
what
Yale,
was their
and
reason for
I'm
turning
gonna
them
tell you, right.
down?
So he had two things stacked against him. One was that because he was a
Kidney,
prior lung and liver
kidney and liver.
transplant, he's his anti I'm sorry, kidney and liver transplant, his antibodies were very, very high. So it meant he ran a risk of rejection if he would get a new lung. The other challenge was that because he was so small, no lung would fit him.
Right.
He really needed a child's lung. But because he was an adult, he was already after 18, he couldn't get a child's lung. So every time we'd go to these different places and he would come back and he'd get very, very sad and depressed and he would say, like, what happens now? Am
Right.
I supposed to just go home and die? Because I want to live so badly. And then one day I get this opportunity by a friend of mine, Dr. Mark Merlin, says, hey, there's a center in New York City that's trying to open up, and they need somebody to help them facilitate their flights for their
Right.
organs. So he says, are you able to do that? I said, yeah, we're doing air ambulance and we're doing some corporate charter. I think I'd be able to do that. I didn't really know anything about it, but I said, I think I can do it. So we come into this hospital in New York City, and we meet with this team. They're not even open yet. They weren't open for like another couple of weeks or something before they can do their first transplant. We were in this process for a while until we got everything started. And we're sitting in the place, and they said, hey, we'd love to have you take our transplants. Can you handle it? I said, of course we can handle it. I didn't know anything about it, but I said, of course we can handle it. And then I said, by the way, I'm just curious, like, what are you guys going to transplant? I said, we're going to transplant lungs. I said, really? Adult lungs? They said, yeah. I said, I pull out my phone and I show it to them. I said, listen, I need your help. I said, I've been to 10 or 11 different transplant centers with this guy over the last year, and everybody turns him down. We needed to really help us. So he said, what's wrong? I said, well, the first problem is that he's very, very small, and he needs to get a child's lung, and they don't want to give it to him because he's not a child, so he can't get it. So they said, well, we can take a small female, and he can get a small female lung. I said, yeah, that makes sense. We can do that. And I said, what are you going to do about the fact that his antibodies are very high because he's been a prior transplant? And they said, well, for that, we can just give him dialysis right before transplant to remove the
Why
antibodies. And I
didn't
said, wow,
anyone
it's
think
unbelievable
about
that
that
nobody thought of
before?
that. And we don't know, but I can tell you this, that we flew all over the country. When I tell you, we were in Texas, and we were in Duke, and we were in you name it, Baylor and Cincinnati and California, went everywhere, and everybody just turned them down because nobody thought of this. It was unbelievable. So I said, can I bring him in? They said, sure, anytime you want. So literally the next day, Yochi came in with his parents. I think I've shown you the picture of them, us with the doctors and the surgeons, and they met him, and they said, yeah, he's a candidate. We're going to bring him on board. I did bring him on, and he lived for another about 2 years after that. And unfortunately, he had a very, very rare blood type. And as I said, he was also small, so there were a lot of things that were stacked against him. So that means even though whoever it was who was on life support, who was
Mm-hmm.
donating a lung, they couldn't give it to him because he was
Right.
just so small. And unfortunately, as you know, Yochi passed away before he got his lung. But I speak to his mom all the time. Actually, I spoke to her just yesterday, and her mom tells me that she has no doubt. She has no doubt that Yochi lived another 2 years because he had that belief that at least he stood a very good chance of getting a lung, and then unfortunately he passed away. But I do this in his memory, and in Shlomo's memory, and in Banish's memory, and that's really the drive that keeps me going. I joke when I say it, but it's really the truth that I haven't slept since 2014, soon after Shlomo died. And
You,
it doesn't mean that I don't
yeah.
close my eyes and go to sleep, but it means that I don't go anywhere without my phone. My phone stays by my pillow. And I wake up every 2 hours in a panic thinking that I missed a phone call. And we do have a solid team. But that's what I always worry about, missing that phone call for an organ transplant.
I,
But
I
Baruch
see
Hashem,
I
we're
see
able to
your
save lives. And
videos
we want to
all
save even
over
more lives.
WhatsApp, Instagram, and all that stuff. Flying organs all over. I'm like, wow, wow,
That's what we try to do. We
you're
try to fly every day. And we
you're
actually build.
amazing, and you're yeah. I I'm really thankful to have you as one of my closest dear friends, and you're you're part of that whole core of close friends that I had that unfortunately are not around nowadays, and you keep me going, and that's very unique in your life. That gives me chizuk every day. No,
Yehuda, you
I
give
don't
me
give a
physics
chizuk.
every day. I'm lucky I'm privileged to, you do. I'm privileged to call you a friend. Everybody has their challenges, and you just attack them head on, and you bike ride, and you exercise, you do everything you got to do. You run Baruch Hashem a successful business, and I'm very privileged and lucky, as are many people. Everybody who knows you, Yehuda, everybody loves you. Everybody gets so much motivation and so much chizuk from you. And you're truly a very, very special
Thank
person.
you. Um, one last thing. You you, you have you have your family is the that's the most important thing to you, and that's what is very unique with all what you do in your life, in your chesed, in your daily thing. Your family is number one, and that's what is the most unique thing in your life from my standpoint.
Thank you. So we always try to do that, family and friends, and still be able to do what we do. And it's only because of the support that we get from them that I'm able to do it. That I can leave I can leave on a moment's notice. I could be home in the morning, and 2 hours later, I'm on a flight flying somewhere. I travel with my passport. I travel with my talisman wherever I go. My talisman's filling in my
Well,
passport just in case. There's been
you
times. I
don't
mean,
know where
I'm
you're
very close
going
friends with Ellie.
in from one second to the next.
I will tell you that if you know Eli Beer from Icharat Sola. So Eli was very, very sick. By the way, his book just
I
came out.
heard
So
about
shout out,
it.
buy his
Someone
book.
told
It's
me
really
about it on
unbelievable.
Shabbos.
It's a great. I bought three of them. My grandson walks around with one of them all day long, pointing to my picture in there, and pointing to Ellie's picture. But Eli Beer is a very, very close friend of mine, and I had the privilege to fly him back after he got sick. If you know, a couple of years ago in COVID, he was one of the first people that got really, really sick. He was collecting money, which he does for United
He's an
Hatzalah. He
amazing
got
person.
sick on Purim, and after he got off the ventilator, he is, and that was the chus that I got to be able to go and bring him back. But these are things that opportunities that just come, and I'll tell you that. And then afterwards, what he called me because he would need me to bring, supplies and medicines to Israel and things like that. And I once got a phone call from him. They needed my help in Israel for a special project. And I remember it was just a regular Wednesday. I'm sorry, regular Tuesday. And he calls me up and he says, "Hey, how'd you like to come to Israel for Shabbos?" I'm like, "Okay, Tuesday. All right, I'll leave tomorrow afternoon or Thursday morning." He says, "I have the special project that you need to help me with." And I said, "Yeah, sure. I got to speak, I got to speak to the family, make sure everything's okay." He goes, "Well, you're booked on a flight and it leaves in 2.5 hours."
What?
I said, But he booked me on a flight. Now, this is during COVID. Yeah, he booked me on a flight. So I had to literally run. I remember I made a U-turn. I went right back to my house. I had 5 minutes to pack up, to grab my equipment. He had already scheduled with Chaim Dessler to get me a COVID test. And then I was heading straight to the airport. So I believe it was 17 or 18 hours from when he called me. I was already in Israel. Project was already done, whatever I had to do, and I was flying back. That's all. I came to Israel literally for a few hours, but again, because I had to be ready to go, and I understood going in that if I need to go somewhere, I have the ability to be able to juggle everything or go ahead and do it. And Baruch Hashem for Wi-Fi and halal, so we can do that
Wi-Fi
on there and
works
work
all
work
over
on the
now,
flight and do whatever we have to do.
even
Right?
in the airplanes.
Exactly.
Not all of them, but most of them.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But definitely halal.
you have to pay for it, right?
Yeah,
Don't you? That's a
halal is the
business
best.
expense.
Yeah, yeah. What are you gonna
but
do,
but
right?
you need it. You need
What
it.
are you gonna do?
It's really you're such a unique person, Simcha. I literally can't I can't thank you enough for what you do for the Klal Yisrael, for Klal, and for Lakewood. Lakewood only Lakewood. Lakewood is lucky to have you as a member of the Lakewood Klal, especially besides Brooklyn, whatever. But Lakewood is very special to have you as part of their Klal, and I'm really, really grateful that I'm very close to you, and it's just you're a very unique individual with unique talent and a unique perspective in life.
Thank you. I feel the same about you, and I think you're gonna do unbelievable with your show. I think the title of your show is great. It's a unique perspective because I think that's something that you teach all of us because you have a unique perspective on everything. You take the bad, you know how to make it good, and you take the good, you know how to make it better, and you find people who are sad and you make them happy. You give people so much chizuk, and you give people so much support, and the world is lucky and privileged to have you, Yehuda Blonder, as part of Klal Yisrael. You're a special
Thank you.
guy.
I
You
really,
really,
really
really are.
appreciate that. And I know if it's coming from you, it's the truth. So I really, really appreciate that. Like Shlomo used to say, tough times don't last. Tough people do.
Correct. And he used to always say, he also said, if
We
it's
even
difficult,
do
we do it.
it.
If it's impossible,
We try
we
harder.
try harder.
Yeah.
We try harder. Right. There's no such a thing as no. You got to figure out. Shlomo used to say that all the time. So he used to say no.
Right.
He says, "Hey, can you do me a
It's
favor?" Can
the
no.
easiest thing
He
is
said,
to
"Figure out
say
how to say
no,
yes."
and
Right. Because then you
right.
just you move away. But he says, "No. Figure out how to say yes. You do anything for these kids. All the helicopter rides, trips that we used to go on to the Bahamas and to other places, and it was sometimes so difficult and so challenging. But he would say, "No. Figure out how to do it. We can do it. We can do it. Don't worry. Nothing's
Everything is
impossible."
possible.
If you
If
put
it's
your heart to it
impossible,
and you put your
we do
mind to
hard.
it,
We try harder,
everything is possible. We try
and
harder. Exactly.
and yeah, that's the way you live. That's the way I live. That's the way everyone, whoever knew Shlomo, came into Shlomo's life or Banish's life, learned that very quickly. And we were all.
Right.
I know it may sound cheesy, but we're all living through their lives.
Right. Exactly.
Thank,
Yeah.
thank you
Well,
so much
Hatzlacha
for
Rabbi
coming
Yehuda.
on.
I'm
Thank
very,
you
very
so much for
excited about
coming
your
on.
show.
We
You're gonna do
definitely
great.
have to do a part two
You're gonna
because there's a lot more that we
absolutely.
didn't cover, and so let's definitely do a part two. Thank you so
Excellent.
much.
Thank you,
You
Yehuda. Be
too.
blessed. Have a great
Good
one.
night.
Have a great one. Thank you so much. Good night.